Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Medicine Show. This time I'm going to be talking about herbs of waysides and abandoned places. These are mostly weeds that grow in areas that humans have created a disturbance, and then humans have stopped whatever that disturbance was and allowed nature to take its course to some extent. So this would include along trail sides, it would include fields or pastures that are no longer being maintained. And these are very common herbs. The ones that we'll be talking about are some of the ones that we haven't talked about in previous episodes, although some of those could also fit into this category. And there are good, versatile medicines for you to know about, things that you can easily gather for free if you live where they grow, and that have a variety of medicinal properties without having a lot of complications from toxicity or low therapeutic margin. So I hope you will enjoy this episode. This is mullen growing from a crack in the pavement right by the medicine wagon. And mullen is very recognizable because it has these very soft velvety leaves that grow in the same basal rosette pattern that we've seen with some other plants, and it will grow to be 6 or so feet tall. The leaves are very large. It's not the only plant around here with hairy leaves that grow out in a rosette like this, but it is the only one that has a velvety texture rather than a rough bristly texture. So foxglove, which is deadly poisonous, and comfrey, which is mostly a garden plant but can become a weed, both have a circle with the same general shape of hairy leaves, but they feel bristly and sandpapery rather than velvety. And once you get to know this plant, it's very recognizable. It like I said, when it's fully grown, it's about 6 feet tall and has yellow flowers on it. So this plant is often found in rocky places, and it is a very good herb for the lungs and respiratory system. It can help break up congestion. If somebody's got a lot of congestion, it will actually make them cough it up. So it's an expectorant, and it's a very useful thing for common colds and conditions of that sort. The flowers also have some medicinal properties, but we'll talk about that in a future episode. This is long-leafed plantain, Plantago lanceolata, and it has these leaves. They're not grass blades, but they're leaves with veins that all run the same direction. And this is a very useful astringent and vulnerary, so it can be used to tighten up the tissue of the skin. It can be used to decrease the size of pores and the amount of oil that's coming out of them. And it can also be used on wounds and stings. It can help dry out things like splinters, and it can decrease the pain of bee stings because it contains salicylates. And it can actually also soothe burns too because of the salicylates and the tannic acids that it contains. It's a very, very common herb and very versatile. And this is the closely related broadleaf plantain. This is red clover. It's not in bloom yet, but when it does, its flower head is like a little round ball of purple flowers. White clover is also common, but the red clover has much larger leaves and they are fuzzier. And red clover, the flower head is the best part to use, but the leaves will work in a pinch. They contain what are called isoflavones, sometimes known as phytoestrogens, which act like a weaker version of estrogen in the human body. This is the very beginnings of wild lettuce, Lactica cereola. It has a leaf that looks a little bit like a dandelion leaf, maybe a little less divided than a dandelion leaf, but then it's got a row of little spines all along the back of it. This plant will get a few feet tall and eventually have some yellowish flowers. If you look online about this plant, you'll see things saying that it's as strong as opium and stuff of that nature. It's not really that strong, but if you let it grow to its full size, trim the leaves, and then come back after they've grown back some, it will get quite bitter, and it will contain a lot of alkaloids that are somewhat sedative and pain relieving. They're not opioids in the strictest sense of the word, but some of them do perhaps interact with some of the same receptors that opiates do. I've used this quite a bit in my practice for helping to ease pain and helping to promote sleep in people who are in pain. The sap is a white milky latex, and that was actually part of a local business by the Shaker community here for many generations. They called it lettuce opium, and it was sold as a substitute for opium. And it has the same texture, and so it could be used in similar ways. But like I said, it's not really on the same level of strength that the milk of the poppy would be. This is curly dock, rumex crispus, and named so because of the curvy margins of the leaves. It has a yellowish root, which is the main part that's used medicinally. It can be taken internally to stimulate the liver and to a lesser extent the kidneys. The leaves can also be crushed up and applied topically to stings, especially stings from stinging nettle, but also bug bites and bee stings and things of that nature. This is Duchesnea, sometimes called false strawberry. This yellow flower will eventually produce something that looks a bit like a strawberry but is pretty much tasteless, though it is edible. And then by contrast, this is actual strawberry. It has a white flower instead of a yellow one, and a pretty similar looking leaf. Willow is a frequent inhabitant of wet places, and it contains, especially in the bark, a substance called salicin. And salicin is metabolized by the body into salicylic acid, which is a powerful anti-inflammatory, pain reliever, and fever reducer. So this is the molecule of salicin as it occurs in the willow bark. It consists of a sugar molecule and another part called saligenin, which is circled in pink. When it's processed by the body, it turns into salicylic acid, which has anti-inflammatory effects throughout the body. And this probably would have been a common substance for us to have in our bodies when people were hunter-gatherers, but the modern diet really does not include many substances that become salicylic acid. These are raspberry leaves, and this is the stem of the plant right here. It's kind of purple and has a waxy coating on it, and they have thorns. Raspberry leaves are sort of the original prenatal nutrient. They contain a lot of folic acid and B vitamins and iron, and they're generally nutritious for other people as well. And they're useful as a tonic for the female reproductive system. Raspberries are very common in waysides and abandoned places, and in this environment here in the Midwestern US, you can harvest them about 4 times a year from the same spot. They're very prolific, and so this right about now is the first time that you would be able to harvest them. If you're harvesting them from the garden, from ones that you're growing for food, be aware that harvesting the leaves will make them produce less fruit. This is yarrow. Achillea millefolium is its Latin name, after Achilles, who used it for battlefield injuries in the Trojan War. I've often said that if I could only have one medicinal plant, this would be the one right here. It is excellent for use on injuries. It helps the tissue to heal up. It helps wounds to close up faster. It's disinfectant and astringent. If it's taken internally as an infusion or a tincture, it will help to break up congestion, and it's also bitter, so it promotes digestion and bowel movements when it is taken internally. And it induces sweating, so it can be used for fevers to break fevers. That's all for this time. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this, like and subscribe, and tell your friends about it. And I will see you on the next episode.